Welcome back to DFPC Fire Talks. We are kicking off 2025 with the DFPC Fire and Life Safety section. That's the section that I am part of. I'm the chief of the Fire and Life Safety section. My name is Chris Brunette. I am joined here today by the 4 branch chiefs of the section. And today we're going to be talking about the Fire and Life Safety section and the different branches that make it up and how they work to support what DFPC does with our mission and vision. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to start right to my right and introduce Chuck Altvater, who is the chief of the Community Risk Reduction and Education branch. So Chuck, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your branch?
Sure. My name is Chuck Altvater, as Chris said, and I am the branch chief for Community Risk Reduction and Education. And I've been with DFPC for 10 years now. And so the branch is made up of 2 units. One does community risk reduction, and the other is the professional development unit. The community risk reduction unit serves the 4 quadrants of the state in assisting local jurisdictions to use the CRR process to make their communities safer. The professional development unit, or PDU, focuses on continuing education for fire inspectors, building inspectors, plans reviewers, and similar professions across the state in programs that we have jurisdiction over here within DFPC.
Nice. So I'm going to continue on to our other branches, but here we are going to talk about in just a few minutes how these different branches interact with one another and why they create the section the way that it is. So the next person I'd like to introduce is our branch chief of our building codes, and that's Bill Bischoff.
Thank you, Chris. And first off, I just want to say my name is Bill Bischoff, and I am the Building Code Branch Chief, and I am honored to sit here with these individuals. Couldn't ask for a finer group of people to head up the branches of our section and our section chief. And the Building Code Branch, our primary duty is to permit public school construction throughout the state. And we do that in a number of ways. We will issue the permit ourselves. We have 2 branches or 2 work units within the branch. One is plan review and the other one is inspections. And the plan review, of course, gets it first off and makes sure that the plans are code compliant, and then a permit is issued, and then it goes to the inspection team. And they will inspect periodically as progress inspections, and then do the final. The day-to-day building inspections are performed by delegated building inspectors who are certified by the division to act on our behalf. And then we also have pre-qualified building departments that can act on our behalf. As long as they meet the qualifications, any local building department can become pre-qualified and handle all of the school projects within their school construction projects within their jurisdictional boundaries if the school district chooses to use them. If there is a pre-qualified building department, the school district always has the choice to use either the state, the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, or that local building department. And then once we issue a certificate of completion or a certificate of occupancy, we turn the project pretty much over to local building or local fire and or DFPC Fire Prevention Branch.
Very good. Well, and that's probably a good segue to move to our next branch, which is our Fire Prevention Branch, which is headed up by Branch Chief Jay Wilmot. Jay, welcome.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. Pressure's on now. Your guys' introductions were so good. I really got to step it up now. But yeah, as Chris introduced me, my name's Jay Wilmot. I'm the Branch Chief of the Fire Prevention Branch. And Fire Prevention Branch is Fire Life Safety Section's biggest branch. We have 4 units, and we do a whole lot. One is plan review. So kind of like Bill had touched on, plans are happening. People are going to install new fire life safety systems. They come to us, and we look at them, make sure the engineering's right. We issue a permit, and then it usually goes to one of our other 3 units. We have a healthcare acute, which is hospitals, CMS inspections. All of our inspectors are CMS qualified, so we do federal surveys for licensure of all hospitals across the state. Then we have healthcare residential, which is all of our assisted livings, all of our residential board and cares across the state. And then we have our other unit, which is, we call it SCRAPS lovingly. It's all of our fire suppression systems. It's our schools program. It's our casinos. It's our waste tires. They wear a lot of hats in that unit. Oh, and fireworks as well. Yeah, we also regulate all sales of fireworks across the state. So we stay really busy. We cover, all borders all across the state. And if you see DFPC cars, more than likely one of my guys. So, yeah.
Pretty good. Yeah, and moving from the fire prevention branch, we move on to fire investigations branch, which is headed up by Todd Hedgelin. And Todd?
Thanks, Chief. My name's Todd Hedgelin. I'm the branch chief of fire investigations, and our responsibilities they extend across the state. We have currently 10 investigators, including myself, all credentialed through the IAAI, NAFI, NWCG for credentialing. We also have 4 dogs that we can utilize in various situations. 2 ignitable liquid detection canines, and we also have 2 canines, one that's a cadaver dog, and then we've got a 4th dog that's actually a tracking and tracing dog that we've recently put to use. The primary goal is for us to support agencies through fire and arson investigations who A, don't have the ability to conduct those investigations, or B, they just simply, it could be a matter of inexperience, they could have nobody present, and we have the ability to take over that investigation at their request should we need to. Work very closely with our partners at the ATF, partners at CBI. We're one of the newer branches, and at this point it continues to grow and get bigger and better.
Very good. No, and that's the section as a whole continues to grow and get bigger and better. So I like that you said that. And it might seem like we're maybe a hodgepodge of different professions, but truly, when I look at what we do in the fire and life safety section, I see it as all interrelated and all interconnected. And so that's kind of what I wanted to have a conversation about today is how we work to support one another in our different branches and how the section itself works to support the rest of the work that the division is doing. You can really think about it as we are the pillars that are holding up that structure, helping to hold up that structure of what DFPC is. And so if the section, the fire and life safety section, is one of those pillars, then you can think of the branches as a different side to those pillars. We all have the same goal, but we are working to help support the mission and vision of the division. And so the way I like to think about it is everything we do is interconnected. And I'll start with investigations. So with investigations, we start to figure out, or we pull in the data or the information necessary to see what maybe went wrong, okay? And let's put arson aside. So, there are going to be those individual instances with fires that occur where maybe there's one bad individual who has started a fire. Okay, that's one thing. But if we can figure out how a fire started with something that went wrong with construction, then we can start to address it in fire prevention or in building codes. And so that's how we can learn from what investigators find to help build on the codes that we are enforcing. And then we have our professional development unit that comes in and can help train people up in order to enforce those codes a little bit more. But it's, what we're finding in investigations and what we're doing in enforcement, building codes and fire prevention, where it goes into what do our professional development unit educators need to be teaching. And then all of this information that we're gathering goes into the reduction of risk within our communities. And so with our community risk reduction unit, we're able to look at the different risks that are affecting our communities and then start to reduce those by addressing them either through enforcement or engineering or education or emergency response or economic incentive, those 5 E's of community risk reduction. So Bill, I think you had something that you
Yeah, I had a
wanted to
question
add.
for Todd. Todd, does your team go in only by request, or can you just go if it's a volunteer fire department? Can you just go in, or do you wait for the local county sheriff to invite you in, or?
We can be requested in by any public authority having jurisdiction, a fire department, a volunteer fire department, law enforcement, a district attorney, someone that's in more or less an elected position that's in that they can request us in, but we can't just come in. And even when we do come in, we don't come in and just take over. The big question that we kind of got the investigators on the page of asking them, what can we do for you? What specifically do you need from us? They may need, hey, can we get a camera? Can you eye guide this scene for us? Can you help us dig, hold a flashlight, whatever the case may be? We'll make sure that we have those marching orders before we actually proceed onto the scene. Actually, and to dovetail onto what you said, arson is only one portion of this, but the overarching thing that I think is important to note for the fire investigation side of things is being able to evaluate all of the potential competent ignition sources. So it's not just a matter of walking in the door and saying, hey, I see the patterns, this is what it was. You have to prove that it wasn't any number of things, and then you have to consider and prove an ignition sequence as to what actually occurred to be able to actually call that fire. Whether that's, and it doesn't matter if it's civil, criminal, we still have to investigate the origin and cause, how it started, where it started.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I like about that is that then you do work with professionals from the fire prevention branch and the building codes branch, and so your team members are able to ask, hey, here is how we think this occurred. Does that make sense based on your knowledge of building construction? Or we believe that we had this arrangement, and we want to know, was that code compliant? Was that a code compliant arrangement, or was something changed or constructed outside of the parameters of the code, and then that helped lead to the eventual fire? So
I have a reverse situation. I'd only been here a couple months, and a good example of that was we had a fire up in Summit County in a hospital. First phone call went to Chief Wilmot, and we were able to determine where we had the fire, what happened, where it happened. We brought them in because of the healthcare facility, and come to find out, things had been altered in a specific room. We pitched that to you.
Yeah, well, it's nice working in tandem because you look at the what, and we kind of look at the why. So why did the fire get as bad as it did? The thing about fire prevention, especially healthcare facilities where we have very a lot of stringent codes, is that fire prevention is a reactive, not a proactive field, meaning that something's happened, it's been investigated, and we've pinpointed what the cause of it was. Why did the fire start? Why did the fire get as bad as it did? Why was there a massive loss of life or a massive loss of property? And then we kind of reverse that into, okay, how can we prevent that from happening again? So Todd goes to a fire, the Coconut Grove fire, for instance, and historically we know that fire burnt very hot very quickly. Okay, why did it burn so hot and so quickly? Well, it was interior finishes, it wasn't proper separation between rooms, and now we've got codes that have kind of addressed those issues. So directly what he's doing in the field kind of guides the profession I'm in as to where these codes are going to be developed and what we're going to address. And then it's our job to not only know the what, why the code is a way and what the code's going to be, but then when we're out in public, actually educate and tell people, why we're requiring doors to have automatic closers, why we need fire extinguishers spaced at certain distances, stuff like that. So it's kind of a on the fence type of thing between the field where Todd works and then the education portion, which Chuck specializes in.
yeah, and to take that even a little bit further, I think we're in an exciting time in the fire service. Because we're seeing this progression from our historic fire prevention services to now we're building on it further and developing it into the community risk reduction services. And I think that's our opportunity to take it a step further. So those things that we address through enforcement and engineering and fire prevention, now we're better able to address or further address in education and economic incentive. But we do that by assessing the communities and taking a look at not just the built environment, but the demographics and everything that surrounds that. And so what it could be is in investigations, we start to see a pattern. And maybe that pattern isn't related to building construction, maybe it's related to behaviors. For example, I have heard of a story where a community was getting a lot of fires that were starting in bathrooms. And so when the investigators started to look into it, they were learning that a specific section of the community was used to cooking on open fires, and they were putting open flames and open fires in the bathtubs and cooking over them, which was turning into structure fires. And so maybe that's probably not something we want to address through enforcement or engineering. It really is an education thing. And that's where we kind of take that next step into community risk reduction where, hey, investigations is finding this, they come to a team like Chuck's and say, you know, this is more of an education thing. It's a difference in societal norms. Maybe we can address it through risk reduction. And so it's just this, I don't even think it's on a straight line. It's more of a cycle, more of a circle where, you know, you find things through investigations, you can address them through building codes or fire codes and prevention, or you can start to look at it through risk reduction. But then those things feed back into investigations and help the investigators become better investigators, because then they start to understand these different ways that maybe fires are starting. So, Bill?
So I was just, this morning I was speaking with one of our investigators, and he was talking about a fire over on the western slope, and there was a fire in a lower part of the building on, say, the south side of the building. And then there was at the same time, the fire started on an upper story on the north side of the building. And so after they did their investigation, they found out that it was balloon framed, which you don't see anymore because now, and it seems like it's a catastrophic occurrences and typically fire occurrences that drive the codes. Like now we have fire stops. You can't go any more than 10 feet without putting in a fire stop. You see western framing where you build the first floor wall and then put the floor on and then build the second floor wall rather than building the exterior walls 20 feet tall with just no draft stop in there, and where fire can just go up and around and drop into another part of the building with nothing to stop it. And so it's interesting that even now we're finding these older buildings still have the same problems that they did 100 years ago.
And Bill, that's something that's really interesting because in community risk reduction, we do a community risk assessment. And one of the things we look at is building stock and the age of the buildings. And we can identify those older buildings through data, and then the fire department can proactively go out and talk to property owners about updating or fireproofing, inserting fire stops into those balloon frame walls. So it all comes together. And so far we've talked a lot about fire prevention, but community risk reduction really goes beyond that, because just like the fire service has gone from just responding to fires, now we respond to EMS and we respond to rescues and we respond to a number of different emergencies, and it all comes together through using that data to find those hazards that are in the community that way.
Well, and just to tie on to Chuck's branch, kind of the way we view it too is he's kind of our translator to the community. Fire prevention, we speak a very specific language. And, if I'm talking about, the thermal effects of smoke propagation and the importance of early detection and response and getting out, he can go in front of a group of third graders and say, hey, smoke detectors save lives. He can really take that message, boil it down, make it more palatable for a bigger audience. It's been a huge help on a lot of these events too. My guys, we're great at what we do. We know the codes inside and out, but then you have, 4 classes of third graders and second graders show up. How do I talk to them in my language? And they kind of fill that gap. They bridge. You've got Kim on your team. You've got some great teacher-minded individuals that can really take our message, what we're doing, and present it in a way that's understandable to whoever the audience might be.
And really, we take that, and although we can teach to 7 and 8-year-olds, second and third graders, we really are a force multiplier for the local jurisdictions in their community education programs. So for the most part, we don't go out and do that directly. We're here to assist those local jurisdictions in doing their own education. We're educating the educators.
The other thing that tag on to Chuck's branch is youth fire setter programs. We've been talking back and forth about when we get fires that are youth set. That's a big thing because we try not to get involved in that. The investigator usually doesn't get involved in that unless we absolutely have to. But we've had meetings about, putting together a better program for that youth fire setter program. So that's another way that we bridge from investigations to CRR.
And there's some exciting things in youth fire setting intervention coming out. We work very closely with the Colorado Risk Reduction Network, which is a nonprofit organization for fire and life safety educators, community risk reduction specialists across the state. But we work closely with them to develop curriculum for those intervention specialists. So we're getting those intervention specialists out to all the local jurisdictions that we can so they can run their own programs in-house and have the tools and the resources they need to refer those youth to the appropriate help they need. And in the case of a incendiary fire, have the proper contacts with law enforcement to refer them, although more often law enforcement's referring to us as a diversionary tactic. Something else we're working on is developing a Colorado intake tool. So that's the process of identifying that youth who's misused fire, identifying what type of case they are as far as the fire setting goes, and then referring them to the proper help through that intake tool, which is basically an interview process. Some of the intake tools that are out there right now are decades old, and a lot's changed in American society in the last 30 to 40 years. So we're updating those tools to be more current with how society is today.
And one thing I really like that we at the state have taken an active role in this, and thank you, Chuck, to you and your team for taking that on, is that we are a state that's made up of 375 different local fire jurisdictions. And sometimes one jurisdiction doesn't know that there's a youth who has an issue in their jurisdiction or in a neighboring jurisdiction. And so it's important that we have that communication across jurisdictional boundaries so that we know that, hey, this youth has now moved to a new jurisdiction and you should be aware that we're working with them or that this jurisdiction is working with them. And so it begins to foster and support those communications so that more of a statewide basis we can start to help to address some of those issues. So,
and not just that they move, but sometimes they live with mom in one county during the week and they live with dad in another county on the weekends and holidays. And sometimes those patterns of where there's fires might not be apparent unless you have both jurisdictions talking to each other. So we can help bridge that gap and create that insight that we need.
And this touches on a thing that I know we are all dedicated to, and that is, and I've heard several of you talk about it, but we're all dedicated to empowering and supporting local jurisdictions. And I think really as a state agency, and a state agency whose vision is to become the premier state fire organization, I think that so much of what we try to do is to support local agencies. And so I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And I know for some of you, your whole team is dedicated to that. Whereas, with particularly our codes branches, our building codes branch and our fire prevention branch, we have this enforcement requirement. But there are still a lot of good things going on where you're working to support and serve those local communities. So I don't know if anybody wants to talk a little bit about that and what your branches are doing in that regard.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Bill. Or are you ready? Okay, no. No, Chris, you're exactly right. I mean, we have all these different districts across the state. Not all of them are the same. We've got Denver County, very populous, find a lot of hospitals, and then we get out on the western slope or in some of the plains communities where we might have regional healthcare areas. We might not have the resources, not all the accoutrement that a Colorado Springs or a Denver might have at their disposal. But we're able to come in and fill that gap, and especially it gets political sometimes where, small towns, it's hard for the fire chief to, say no to the mayor. And a lot of times, for lack of a better term, we come in to be the bad guys and have the difficult conversation to the school district that, hey, you need to spend X amount of money or whatever it might cost to address this concern because this is a code requirement. This is a safety thing. And when you break it down like that, I think the message really gets across that we're on the same team. We're just wearing different jerseys. What we want is a safe Colorado, and you want a safe population, especially in the schools. I'm just trying to set you up, Bill, to go. But when we're able to come in and fill that need and be that resource for those communities, I think it's
and on the building code branch, we prefer to think that we administer the codes rather than enforce them, because our primary duty on the inspection side is education. Because we come in, like I said, we don't do the day-to-day building inspections. We come in and do periodic progress inspections. Then we're tasked with doing the final inspection. So what we want to do is educate our contractors, educate the school district, educate our design professionals, educate the local fire departments, educate the local building department. If they care to join us on inspections, we always welcome them to join with us when we're walking. We work hand in hand with so many different local fire departments across the state that I'd be afraid to even try to name all of them. And of course, we work with Jay's team all the time. That we'll pull a building permit and we'll determine the size of the building, what it can be, the occupant load of the building, and then whether or not, by building and fire codes, whether or not it needs sprinkling. And then we turn it over to the local fire or to the fire prevention branch, and then they jump in and do their thing on the plan review and inspections for the suppression systems. We have both passive and active fire protection in building codes. We have firewalls, we have fire barriers, we have fire partitions. It just goes on and on. But we like to think that our primary duty is to educate so that our job becomes easier year by year.
Education is always the forefront of what we do. What I always tell our inspectors, and when I'm out on inspections, you think fire prevention, you think fire inspector, we're very compliance driven. I want us to be more commitment driven. Because if I can go into a school and I can educate, compliance is a moving target, right? You might be in compliance today, but out of compliance tomorrow. There's little things we're going to find everywhere we go that are technically out of compliance. And anyone who's spent time in the building codes or the fire codes know it contradicts itself in times. So when we go into schools specifically, education is at the forefront of what we do because we're only there for 1 day a year. Maintenance inspections are done on a yearly basis. Those school administrators, those teachers, they're there the other 364 days a year. So when I'm going into these inspections, my goal isn't to get compliance because you're never going to have it. I might have them 100% compliant, but then the code cycle changes next year and the code's updated and there's things they're doing now that are outdated. What I'm trying to do is get commitment from that person through education, through talking like, hey, we can't have door stops. This is the reason why. This is in a passive protection in the building. It closes off. This is a rated door. It's a rated assembly. This is what it does. And those educators that we walk with in those schools, they're eager to learn. They want to hear what we're saying because they want what's safe for their students too. So the end goal for us is always going to be commitment over compliance and education over enforcement.
And that's where Chuck's team comes in because, like you said, the codes change every 3 years. And so there's something new and exciting every 3 years that we get to try to figure out how to work that into our plan.
Yes, and for schools, and I guess for most of our programs, we actually adopt every other code cycle. So it's every 6 years when we have changes, but there's changes in between because there's that code cycle in between. So we do a series of classes for local jurisdictions, for the inspectors on the updates every 6 years. And then we also do education for teachers because teachers are part of that willing compliance in the fire code. If they understand why you can't put an extension cord under that mat and run it over with an AV card all day long, then they're more likely to not do that. If they don't understand, they're going to say, well, the fire marshal was here and he was just a mean guy and won't let us do this. And they're going to do it as soon as you walk out the door. So really, education is the key to willing compliance.
Education, even from the investigation side of the house, all the points you guys are making are tremendous. And fire investigation, it's kind of hard to get, call it regular training. It's not the easiest training in the world to go get. So one of the things that we do is we implemented a see one, do one, teach one theory with the majority of the agencies that are out there. And I don't want to put a number on it, but there's a large portion of agencies that have no investigators, they have no inspectors. So when we have the opportunity to educate them on an inspection thing, I will pass that to one of the other branch chiefs. If it's an investigation thing, we try to create a partnership with people, meaning give us a call, we'll come out, walk with us, come do an investigation with us. If you have another fire, let's come out, we'll do another one. So over the course of time, we're developing a relationship with this agency. And at the same time, we're teaching them how to do it. And by the time, we get to a certain place, they're going to be able to teach us what it is that we taught them. And to formalize that, we partner very heavily with the Colorado chapter of the International Association of Arson Investigators. They put out a regular training every November. So being able to hold up all these other agencies, and it's not just fire agencies that we'll go out and teach to. Police departments, sheriff's departments, there's a lot of these agencies that don't have the investigation side of the house. So being able to work with everybody in this, when I say everybody, all the branch chiefs in this room and all these other agencies, that's a very helpful thing for me to be able to do.
It's interesting being able to sit here and listen to you all talk because what I heard a lot of was partnerships. I've heard a lot about support. I heard a lot about, forming coalitions to help to battle this battle against fires. And so it's just kind of cool to see that as a state agency, the people who are really taking the leadership roles here are dedicated to working with local jurisdictions and building them up to make sure that we are addressing these issues from all angles. And so it's an honor to get to work with you all, and we're just about out of time here, but I do want to say that I like the message that you've communicated today, and if you had one last message to communicate related to your branches, I wonder what that would be. And so if you have something top of mind that you can share with folks, maybe we'll close out with that.
Right now, there are approximately 30 pre-qualified building departments across the state, and that's it. And my message is I'd like to see more of the local building departments come to us and become pre-qualified so that the school districts have the choice of using their local building department rather than coming to the state every time. Because our workload gets tremendously backlogged, is the best way to say it, every spring and summer. And so we like to set goals but our goals are unrealistic at this time because we get so much work to do with so few people. And that's what I'd like to say is, don't be afraid that because we're the state, we're not going to try to run your building department. We're going to let you run it, let you set your own fees, and we just tell you what codes to use.
I would say that for investigations is don't be afraid to call us. We're not going to take over your scene. We're not here to run your show. One of the things the investigators and we've talked very heavily about this is we're here to support and make your program better, not to take it over.
Well, so for the listeners that are in the fire service, I think my message would be reach out to us. We'd love to come out, help educate your inspectors. We'll learn from you probably just as much as you'll learn from us. And for the listeners that aren't part of the fire service, that might just be listening in, to hear what topics we're saying, I'd say my biggest message is just as a layman's person, just having some situational awareness is going to help protect you and your family more than anything in these code books. Knowing where your exits are, having batteries in your smoke detectors, understanding that you can't hang things from sprinklers, and the little things we see in every restaurant I go to. And my wife always gets on me because I'm always looking up at the ceiling, checking, making sure things aren't blocked. But I think just having some situational awareness about yourself allows what we do with the active and passive protections in the fire code to keep you safe and buy you some time. So those would be my two messages.
There's an old quote in the fire service that says, there's no honor in fighting a fire that could have been prevented. And the best way to prevent fire and other emergencies is to really get to know your community. Do a community risk assessment, look at the community from all perspectives, identify the risks, and then take action to reduce or mitigate those risks.
Well, guys, it's been an honor talking with you today. Chuck, Bill, Jay, Todd, it is an honor to get to work with all of you. What you are doing with your teams is a real benefit to our communities. I believe that wholeheartedly. And so what we do in the Fire and Life Safety section is just a culmination of all the work of you and your teams. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for tuning in to the DFPC Fire Talks. We're planning to do this once a month, and so hopefully we'll get back together here again in 1 month, and we'll talk a little bit more. But thanks for your time today, and be safe.